Okay, so this was the ideation board, right? So all the ideation sketches, all the ideas for the
Yeah.
project, which were pretty cool and kind of like really figuring out what works well, what can we take out of. If the context we want to put in here is kind of like the encounter, right? So now the question is, what could be that encounter? The idea that the girl has to go through a certain area, how it's usually are in games. There's a certain area, but in order to go through, there's the boss. So how is she fighting the boss? The boss has boss mechanics, and then we have to give a solution in order that the player is kind of like has the possibility to win against the boss, right? And if you can show this in your portfolio, you have a big advantage over something which is kind of like just visually designed. You also give problem solving, and you also kind of think a little bit like a game designer, which also gives you an advantage. You show that you think how they need someone to think, right? Because you're just not visually doing
Yeah.
stuff. How could the cityscape fit into the context? Question to you.
It's where where everything was happening. So it's kind of this city destroyed city environment.
What could happen to her, or how does the could the encounter look between these two entities while they are in the city? That's really the interesting question we need to answer. We want to avoid to just like now draw or paint like a city scenario where just people are walking or something. We need to visually tell the story, or we need to visually say the girl is kind of like fighting this monster which you were designing already, right? And how are they fighting? How is the interaction between those? If you just show like this is the city where the girl is and there are some people and it's kind of like this dystopian city, that's fine, but it doesn't give enough context. So you could think about any type of scenario, any type of position, or any type of situation in your sketches here. Like I like this one with the shipwreck, for example. The shipwreck is a very narrow space, right? So
Hmm.
you could also think like maybe she's just exploring, she's just walking through the city. There's this huge shipwreck, and then she's going inside. And when she's going inside, something is falling down, or so, like something is closing behind her, and she's trapped in that very narrow area of this shipwreck. So we can really start here to just think about okay, maybe here are some rocks, maybe here are some like toxic, huge barrels, which kind of like had some of these radiated liquids inside, which made him mutate. Add a cool game mechanic here to fight the boss. Maybe she can shoot stalagmites down from above, you know.
That's a cool idea.
And maybe these stalagmites also mutated at some point, or there's some sort of organic stuff which is super toxic and dangerous. But this is a good point. You basically can use your sketches you already have done to just give yourself an idea, or just a spark of an idea for the scenario or the context. What we could say, like homework, is basically first of all, you do 4 scenario sketches, so just sketches, just but 4 different scenarios. They have to be completely different and separate from each other. You do 4 sketches, and then you choose one of these. So you say, okay, we have A, B, C, and D, and let's say it is B. B is a cool one. So then you can easily say, well, the best idea or the best way to showcase this is maybe doing not 1 frame. It's kind of like tough. So how about you just do 3 frames? How we do it also in a movie production, where we usually do sequence design, where we design something like a storyboard. Or like the cool thing about doing this in your portfolio, nothing is limited. So no one is saying you have to do always these frames or just 1 frame or one thing. For me, it's important. It's important that you have the eye catcher, the eye candy, that someone stops by and we can take this as your thumbnail. Think about like a thumbnail on ArtStation, or like one image on Instagram where people stop and they really want to know about what's happening. Maybe this moment of encountering. And then we take that to get in and attract people, recruiters, art directors, but also art enthusiasts, right? And then they look into, okay, he actually designed the character, he designed the creature, he designed the movement of the creature, and then he give it context. They see you are also a valuable asset to the production because you kind of like can communicate these ideas. then you can do like 4 or 3 different frames where she's, I don't know, we can again take this as an example. So this is maybe number 1. She's seeing this hole right in the streets, in the city, the opening scene, right? But maybe this is not tentacles in this case, maybe it's kind of like smoke or something, right? And then they go closer to the hole, and then at the end she's jumping down there. End goal is kind of like a little product you're building. Your little product is this little story you're telling of her in the city fighting this boss. And everything we have more, which is not lowering the quality of the product, we can put in. Focusing on really everything that makes the product, the portfolio better. Try not to make everything more that is lowering the quality of the product, because that's not what we want. We want to showcase the highest possible quality, and then set yourself a deadline that you not kind of like do it as long as there's no energy anymore, because we already know after this amount of work, after this time spending all the weeks on working on this portfolio or this project, we need to get some energy in. So we need to get this done. This is important. So set yourself a deadline. Make sure you really stay close to that and say, okay, until that, I need to have everything necessary. Everything I have more is fine. And maybe if it's good enough, I put it in. But if it's not good enough and we have to be realistic, then we take it out, because it doesn't make any sense. Thinking about all the stuff we already discarded here. Like, we don't need to put everything in the portfolio, right? But also a lot of these ideation things we can put in the portfolio, because it's basically the starting. And then we also label it with ideation. So we can take all the sketches that are good quality and they are part of the idea, or kind of like finding the idea. We can make them together in one big canvas, for example, call it ideation or ideation sketches. Then you can also showcase, okay, this is the way I think, this is the way I communicate. So if I have an idea, I draw it out. And I don't like the idea, I draw something else. And then I move on. But this is the process I use to work. And this is what we want to communicate. We want to communicate you can make a product from start to finish, and you have your own way to think. Afterwards is we need to evaluate what we can do better. And what do we want to do better for the next product? Do we want to do something more realistic? Do we want to work on your painting skills? Do we want to do something where you paint more, where the premise and goal is that you're going to paint more work, right? Showing and work, also just working on your skill, basically. Do not stop working on your strength, which is line art, for example. We continue to use that in the process, but we can also focus on, okay, what's your weakness? Is it maybe designing, just the shape design itself? Or is it kind of like storytelling? We have to be very neutral to the process. But we need to reflect and we need to optimize at some point, because otherwise we do not improve over the process. And since we know this industry is kind of like constantly growing, constantly evolving, this is our job.